Welcome everyone to our panel, How to Build the Currency of the Future. And yeah, I want to introduce the panel and all the wonderful people on the panel list. So actually, why did we decide to have a panel on that topic? In October last year, the program committee met, and yeah, we think, what are topics people are interested in, and we are also, the program committee is also stakeholder and interested in interesting talks, and which topics are interesting and which speakers are interesting. And I always, it all starts with Lars Hupel. It all started with Lars Hupel, who is here on the panel, and I wanted Lars as a speaker. So Lars, he used to be, or maybe still is, a blockchain expert. But I asked him, so can you talk about blockchain in your current role at a company which is actually creating machines to print money, money printing machines? And he said, yeah, central banks, we work with central banks, and central banks do not like decentralized money. So I can talk about decentralized, sorry, they don't like decentralized money, they like centralized money, I can talk about centralized money. I was like, okay, then we have a talk like that. And then Olivier, who is also here on the panel, then he came along, he was also, or he is on the program committee, and he saw the last name and the topic, and he was like, we talked about it and said, Lars, he is consulting, or he is talking to central banks. And then Olivier said, I'm also talking to central banks. I was like, huh? Because Olivier is obviously a blockchain expert. And then, a couple of days later, I thought, yeah, maybe we should have, a cage fight or something like that, or a celebrity deathmatch. And I was like, no, maybe that's not a good idea. And then I thought, maybe Stefan Tilkov, who is CEO of INNOQ, very nice company, I work for INNOQ. He gave two blockchain talks here at GOTO Amsterdam over the past years. So maybe it's a good idea to put him also on the panel, because he's maybe a bit more, Warren Buffett says, never ask a barber if you need a haircut. So obviously if we, I'm just... Lars is...
I think Stefan is not talking to central banks, so that's fine.
Exactly. And, therefore, he's more, he has the architecture view. It's a technical conference. We want also to focus on the architecture, and he has this view and is kind of, I would say, he doesn't care as long as it's the best solution for the problem. And that was it for a long time. So we came together, we thought about the panel, and the idea of the panel is that we have several categories, let's say, of questions. So first we want to discuss all the types of digital currency which are around. Then we want to talk about architectural drivers and how all the currency, the different approaches address those drivers. And then we have something I would say is called miscellaneous, where we talk about society, all things which do not fit into the first parts. So we prepared quite a lot of questions. So even if you don't ask a question, we have enough questions for you. But please ask questions which basically fit into the, let's say, the bucket we are discussing for around 10 minutes, always a bit more, maybe a bit less. Or you can also, you can stand up and ask the question, or you can write a question in the app. Okay, so now we have 4 people. So what's the role of John? So I must confess, I hadn't him on the, he was not on my mind when I thought about the panel, but I was his track host yesterday, and when I prepared last week, basically the introductions, I saw, he gave a talk about the James Webb telescope, or data, what you can do with them, and then I saw he is an absolute payments expert. So he is the CTO of a company called Velo Payments, but before that he also he ran or founded other companies and worked in financial services for a long time. And not only that, he was involved in standards and all the things. So I just asked him, and he said, yeah, why not? I spice up the panel a little bit. So that's basically the idea. Okay, so introduction done. I hope I didn't talk too much, but now, let's get started. So after the introduction, I want to ask each of you, can you for 2 minutes roundabout tell the audience what are your interests in this topic, currency, digital currency? Let's start with Stefan.
Okay, so my interest, as you rightly pointed out, started with that whole blockchain thing, and I think I jumped on the panel because I thought this is a good chance to apologize. That's a little too far. So I don't believe I have to apologize, but I've really changed my mind, and I wanted to share a bit of that, and also see and find out what your views on this particular topic are. There are two things that I care about in this particular thing. One is the technology side of things. I think that if we're supposed to have digital money in the future, I find it highly unlikely that it will be based on blockchain technology. So I'm interested in your views, and we can share insights on that. I'll happily explain why if anybody's interested. But I also have a personal interest, which is if there is digital money, then I'm going to be one of its users. All of us are going to be its users. So I really, really care from a political or society point of view about what this thing is that's being enabled there and why and for what reason and with what attributes. So I think that's going to be an interesting discussion as well. And I have lots of opinion. I only have opinion in this particular thing, not expertise. I'll try to make up one for the other.
Olivier.
Yeah, well, before I went into the innovation space, let me put it like that, I used to work for a bank, being in charge of the updates of the systems with regards to payment infrastructures, etc. And also was in charge of the migration from the traditional system to the SEPA payment system that we had in a point in time. And it also happened to be a letter of credit bank, an LC bank, which is a type of payment. And in this period of time, I found out that in the background, the whole payment world is extremely inefficient. And in some countries, you think it's extremely efficient, but it's not. And in some countries, you literally wait for a week before your money arrives in your account. And when I came into contact with blockchain, and especially also the smart contract part, I saw, hey, we can do this much more efficient. Not only from a direct payments point of view, but especially also from a conditional payments point of view. So that's where my interest started. And I really wanted to find out how can we implement this in real life. And this is why I chat with central banks.
Okay, thank you. Lars.
Yes, I'm a little bit biased because we're building a product for digital currency, which, if you have attended my talk earlier today, may or may not use blockchain. So we're kind of agnostic towards that. And the reason why we're doing this is because I also believe that currency is kind of a basic building block of a society, one of the basic building blocks of society. And while the financial sector, the private sector, offers some goods and services to citizens, to enterprises and so on, I think a large part of our infrastructure should be guaranteed by the public sector. So, for example, governments or central bank and so on. So I'm here from a perspective of seeing currency through a lens of utility to society, and then from that lens trying to follow what kind of, or trying to derive what sorts of technical properties are required to make that happen.
Okay. So I don't know any of these guys actually, so my introduction was what you just said, so nice to meet you guys. I like Stefan already.
Thank you, John.
These guys are going to be a bit of a challenge, I think. My background's actually is working it out 40 years now in investment banking. Came straight out of university, straight into banking. I've been global head of architecture for several of the largest banks, and when blockchain came out, it's not blockchain, Bitcoin came out, I was actually head of architecture at Visa, and somebody sent me an email saying, we've got to look at this, and I had access to quite a lot of machines and quite a lot of resources, and so we did a bit of mining, got a couple of dozen Bitcoins, left them, forgot it for several years. Lost the keys, all that sort of stuff. And they were worth nothing at the time, not even a penny. And a few years later, I did a talk on Bitcoin and blockchain, as some of you guys have done as well. This was, again, another 10 years back. And I used a company credit card to buy a bunch of Bitcoins. And the idea was to demonstrate how crap it was and slow and how the system worked. And so I was going to hand out 0.27 Bitcoins to anyone in the audience who would actually take them at the time. And nobody could. We couldn't get it working. And that it was a large audience. And so I sold the company, and a little bit later I was looking through and found all these Bitcoins, and there they were, and I sold them and made quite a bit of money. And then I spent several days looking through the old laptops and things, eventually found the keys for these other ones. So I've made money out of it, but I do not believe in particularly anonymous, distributed blockchains. I'm not a great fan of cryptocurrencies at all. For me, it's a Ponzi scheme. And a lot of these delays that people talk about in banks are in fact just inefficiencies because people are still using FTP and it's all synchronous and everything needs to be done in batches. It's not the fact that things don't get from A to B. When you go into these places, you can make it a lot smoother. So I think it's going to be an interesting chat.
So I wanted to start, with a, let's say, brief introduction. What types do we have? And before we do that, there is one question from the audience already. What's the panel's definition of a currency? So we know what digital means, but what is actually a currency? I mean, not everyone needs to answer, but maybe one or two.
That's one for Lars, I think.
Yeah. So if you ask in the literature, you have a few different functions that a currency needs to satisfy, which is means of payment. It should be a store of value. It should be a unit of account. And arguably, it should also be legal tender, or should be easily exchangeable for legal tender. So that's pretty much a textbook definition of currency. Right? So that, for example, disqualifies Bitcoin because no one is pricing their goods and services in Bitcoin. And other money types, like, for example, actually maybe we just wait for the money types then. Yeah. But that's the basic textbook definition.
Okay, yeah. Okay. So that means, I mean, talking about types, I mean, we also had the question, is Apple or Google Pay or PayPal, isn't that already a digital currency? So by definition, it's not. Do I get that right?
I mean, it is in the sense that I can make payments, and I can also to some extent store value in it. So if I have a PayPal balance, they have a banking license, they will keep it safe. But technically speaking, it's not legal tender, so I can always withdraw it somehow and eventually convert it to cash. In case of PayPal, I need to first transfer to a normal bank account and then go to the ATM. So it's kind of as good as legal tender, but it's technically speaking it isn't. But it is definitely a digital means of payment. So that's
based on a fiat currency. So effectively, it's a means to get currency.
But what means legal tender?
Legal tender means that I can pay. Basically, I can pay my taxes with it. So my government will accept payment with that money for obligations. It does not mean that a merchant has to accept it, because I mean I'm not sure here how it's in the Netherlands, but at least in Sweden, for example, there's lots of shops that do not accept cash anymore. That doesn't mean that cash is not legal tender. It just means that people have decided not to want cash.
Okay. And looking at other, so that was the one possibility. But what about CBDC? Just to
can I just add? Sorry, before you go to the, can I just add? I thought about this for a few seconds now. I think that I don't agree with you regarding the disqualification of Bitcoin. I mean, everybody knows now that I'm not a fan, but I think to say Bitcoin is not money because it doesn't meet the definition that that people don't put a Bitcoin price on stuff? Isn't that a very theoretical thing? I mean, I could easily do that. Nothing stops me from doing that, and some people did, at least for a certain amount of time. So
yeah, but it's highly contextual. I mean, I arguably in El Salvador, Bitcoin has been named as legal tender, so you could say that in El Salvador it is actually currency, whereas in Europe, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find any merchant that would price their goods.
well, I totally agree regarding the legal tender aspect. I was just wondering about the other one that you said, but that's okay.
Yeah, so fair enough. But so, yeah, as I'm saying, it's highly contextual, and there could be a hypothetical future in 5 years where everyone just prices their service.
I think technical, though, it's a currency.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. There's a question.
Oh, yeah.
It's also that somebody needs to take care of the value of such a currency, not taking into account.
Well, that's the difference between a fiat currency and a digital currency. Because
So
the fiat currency is supported by the government, backed up with tanks and missiles.
Maybe we should explain fiat before we go into that.
So I think we should repeat the question, right?
Okay.
Apologies.
Yeah, so the question was, now I cannot repeat it. Can you say it again? Sorry, my apologies.
It seems like that the currency is a way to pay.
Okay.
Who defines the value of
Exactly. So currency is a way to pay, and who defines the value of the payment? Yeah.
Well, fiat currency, as I said before, is backed up by the government and the entire might of that government. And if the currency goes down, is devalued, the inflation rate increases. And if there's a threat, it is tanks, missiles, and the army come out to protect the value of that currency, because it's effectively the means for that currency, for that country to exist. The digital currencies, it's anyone's game. It's basically whatever's in the press or Facebook or whatever, and the currency goes up or down by no detectable means whatsoever. It's been proven to be pretty much random.
So it's, when you say it's random, so we have also one, looking at the question, in Sweden we have a digital payment system co-owned by the biggest banks that everyone uses, so that wouldn't be a fiat currency.
No, but a lot of them can be, for example, you look at the euro dollar, which is, for those of you that don't know, is not euro as in where we are now, and the dollar. After the Second World War, America released a thing called euro dollar, which is pegged to the dollar and allows you to trade an exchange of this euro dollar without going through the Federal Reserve Bank. And effectively, it's pegged to the dollar. But these other currencies, which a lot of the central banks come up with, are still pegged to. So if the interest rates go up or down, or the exchange rates go up and down, these bank currencies go up or down pegged to a base currency, whether it be the euro, the dollar, the sterling, the Hong Kong dollar, etc.
Okay.
But I mean, isn't it always the market that determines the value of something? I mean, of course you have more or less trust in a currency based on who has issued it and who's behind it. I completely agree with that. But you still, I mean, nobody really defines the value except the actual market rate that's applicable for exchanging it for something else.
I have to contradict you there, because we need to make a distinction between like the euro as a concept, as a denomination, versus the different representations of the euro, right? So you have the euro representation as banknotes, and you have a euro representation as your bank money, if you have an account at ING and your account balance says 50 euro. And the government guarantees that this is always 1-to-1. So there's no market increase or decrease of the amount of money you have at ING. Then you also have other privately issued things that might be denominated in euro, like stable coins, and they are freely traded. So 1 euro in stable coin could be worth 98 cents if the market doesn't trust the issuer. So you have these two separate axes, I guess, and for some of these things the government actually regulates that they're always 1-to-1 to 1-to-1 forever, and for some of them they don't. So
yes, but nobody, typically at least, nobody guarantees an exchange rate from euro to dollars or something.
Yes, that is accurate.
That's a market given.
That's
Exactly,
the market,
that's
yes.
But if you've got a stable coin and it's not backed by the government or a bank, and the bank disappears, then the stable coin disappears too.
Yes.
And that has happened.
That has
So it's not
happened.
really stable.
Yeah.
It's somewhat stable.
But then you're
possibly
discussing
stable.
the backing mechanism of this
Yeah, so
stable
you-
coin in itself.
But at the end of the day, you still need a fiat currency that is something that you're not going to lose the value of.
it can be fiat currency or something else, an asset reference
And a
tokens or whatever. But
Big government with lots of tanks and...
all right.
So, but what is actually a stable coin? So a stable coin.
A stable coin, if you look at it very technically, is a coin that has the goal to maintain a stable value. I'm not going to discuss against what, but to maintain a stable value.
Okay.
So your Big Mac coin can be a very valid stable coin if you can always buy one Big Mac with it.
Okay. Okay.
And the point over having the original coin that it's pegged to. So a stable coin that's pegged on $1 as opposed to $1,
Yeah.
where's the advantage?
Well, it's
What's the point?
It's usable with
Yeah.
the infrastructure that's available for this
Where-
kind concept. If you care about it, if you don't,
Yeah.
that's no value. But
No, it's a sort of it's a devil's advocate question. Isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you've got $1, why do we need to invent lots of other stable coins that represent this same dollar that you've got?
Because Lars hasn't done his job yet. So
No, but here I agree with you that you can use it on certain infrastructures that can lead to certain efficiency gains if you use that
yeah,
infrastructure.
I'm not
we're
saying you
dealing
want
with-
that, but I'm saying that's
No,
how
but
you-
that's how you can use it.
But we're dealing with
yes.
numbers at the end of the day, and if you can move a ledger from one to the other, and no money actually changes hands, this is what happens. It doesn't matter whether it's a stable coin or the original.
Yeah, but I cannot move a original euro or dollar over a blockchain infrastructure or another infrastructure, unless I use the
Move it over
The-
SWIFT
the-
or
yeah.
SEPA, but it's still instantaneous, and actually it's quicker than Bitcoin.
yeah. But
And it
I'm
keeps
not
him.
an-
It keeps.
I'm not an
it keeps,
advocate of
gives you a
Bitcoin.
job.
So.
So is the Meta created currency? Is that a stable coin?
Libra. I mean,
Libra, yeah.
Libra was supposed to be a stable coin that is pegged to a set of currencies. So it was like 20% euro and 15% dollar or whatever that combination was. And that, funnily enough, that is also a thing that already existed. It's called special drawing rights from from some international organizations. But basically, the idea was that at the time, Facebook, they said, well, we don't want to move money over SWIFT because we feel it's too expensive, it's too slow. I'm not advocating in favor of it, I'm just trying to paint their reasoning. So they said the legacy payment infrastructure is far too slow, and you have lots of intermediaries that take a lot of fees. For example, if I'm immigrant and I'm working in a rich country and want to send money back to my home country, then there's lots of intermediaries that take a hefty fine for that, sometimes up to 15%, and it's also very slow and it's cash-based and whatnot. So why don't we create an international currency, kind of like an internationalized version of PayPal, where it just instantly send money around the globe? And their idea was that instead of having to pick the US dollar, because that would make them then completely dependent upon the Federal Reserve Bank, picking a bag of currency. Turns out that strategy didn't work, and all the central banks banded together and said, no, don't do that.
Okay.
Instead of just one central bank telling them not to do that.
Yeah. We also had the Dogecoin on our list. What is a Doge? Is it called Dogecoin?
The Dogecoin, something you shouldn't get into.
Okay. So we have.
I think we all agree that that one is a Ponzi scheme.
I'm glad you said that.
And
Including-
actually, the
including
biggest
the
manipulator.
But still explain what it is.
Oh, the Dogecoin. Technically, it's a cryptocurrency. It's a cryptocurrency of the Doge
It's a meme, right?
blockchain network.
it used to be a joke, and then it turned out that
Okay.
Elon liked it, and
Yeah.
Okay.
That
it
Elon-
rose for some reason. It rose in value, and people made a lot of money.
Technically speaking, it's almost a copy paste of Bitcoin, if I stand correctly.
Like so many of the others.
Yes.
Yes, I mean they openly admit to that, right?
Yeah.
So
I agree.
Yeah, but it's kind of a freak accident. This currency.
A Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
Then you laugh about that coin and not about the Bitcoin.
So
we can talk
sorry?
about. So the question was to talk about Bitcoin, right? Was that what you said?
It is that different coin, the Dogecoin, is kind of the same to Bitcoin, and it's a little bit of laugh about it. So apparently that's a joke. But
So
Why
I
is
have
Bitcoin
no.
not
So
a joke?
This is going to be.
The question was, why is Bitcoin not a joke?
It is.
Sorry.
I'll have to say, so you're not going to love me anymore. I don't think Bitcoin is a joke. I think Bitcoin does, at least, how can I phrase that? It's at least consistent, right? So Bitcoin has a vision that many people, for very good reasons, don't share. And I totally understand why people would not like that. That vision is you want money without states, without nation states, without that. And it really depends on your attitude towards politics and society and philosophy and whatever. And if you believe that nation states are a bad thing and your government is out there to mess things up, then Bitcoin is an honest thing that addresses those things. And it uses it has a reason to use that technology. So even though I don't like that technology, and even though I'm not really buying into that Bitcoin story, I understand why it uses that technology, because it's the only thing that satisfies those needs. And if you want that kind of decentralization for a cryptocurrency, which is, to my knowledge, the only use case that exists out there, then that could be a possible thing that you might want to do. You can also say, I love the fact that I'm living in a democracy that has a somewhat decent government and that has institutions that we can trust and courts that I can appeal to, and all those things that we've learned over the last, 500 years. If you believe in that, then Bitcoin is completely stupid to you. Also, if you like things to perform well, then it's also very stupid.
But maybe to give you a kind of factual answer, so I own no cryptocurrencies. I own none of them. The reason why Bitcoin should be treated a bit more seriously than the others is because there's a lot of stake in Bitcoin. So it's trading at quite a high price. It has a very high market capitalization as opposed to many of those others. So if we're going to talk seriously about cryptocurrency, Bitcoin would be the one to talk about. Maybe Ethereum as well. Yeah. But as Stefan said, if you don't buy the whole premise, then it's also a joke, I guess. But there's a reason why one of them is a bigger joke than the other one, I guess.
I think it was a thought experiment that was taken too seriously. I mean, I love the idea. I agree with you. It's when you read the paper, it's brilliant, and the whole idea is brilliant. But it was taken way too seriously, and we're in a mess now.
I guess the problem is that in the past you created money based on gold, for example, because it was scarce. And the idea of Bitcoin is that it's also scarce. You only have a certain amount of Bitcoin.
Yeah. So the question is the comparison with gold, but like gold, Bitcoin is limited in resource, but gold is tangible and actually does something. It's physical. We use it in electronics. People like to put it around their neck and wrists and things. And it's tangible. The Bitcoin, yes, it has a market cap until people start drawing the money out, and all of a sudden it disappears. It could go down to zero. There's nothing there.
But there's also a bigger philosophical argument to make, I think, because I think almost all economists agree that basing a currency on something that is rare or limited in supply is actually not a great idea, because you have central banks creating money, like the cash, which is economists call M0 because it's like the original monetary supply. And then you have, on top of that, commercial banks engaging in lending, creating more money out of thin air. But the money that they're creating, they're not creating it because they love money so much. I mean, they do love money, but they're lending it out so that it can do stuff in the economy, right? So you're creating more money, which should hopefully lead to investments, lead to growth, leads to building stuff, manufacturing stuff. And if you have a currency that is based, for example, on gold, that's going to be really, really hard to do because there's only so much gold that you have, which means that you only have so much money that you can make, and you never go past the M0. And like in the economy, the money that is created by banks would be then the M1, that's larger, and then it goes all the way, I think, up to M3 when you start counting more and more things. And generally speaking, the idea is that more money is good.
Yeah, you can do quantitative easing.
I agree with that.
But this is also where economists are arguing a little bit, because there are also economists out there that say, hey, if we would redesign the whole money system right now, we wouldn't do it like we are doing right now, because we are actually fighting debt problems with more debt, which is philosophically not the most sustainable part to do so on the long term. So it's...
I guess we have a legacy system. Legacy system.
So I think sorry.
Do you think digital money will replace cash money in the future, in the near future, completely, so that you're not able to withdraw cash anymore. Say that way.
So I can tell you an answer that is fresh off the presses.
Repeat the question.
Ah, okay, sorry. The question was about if cash will replace, if digital currency will replace cash, and you will not be completely, and you will not be able to use cash anymore. And the answer that's fresh off the presses today. There was a press conference from the European Commission, and they've made it abundantly clear that they want to have digital currency besides cash. There might be a reduction in cash use, but they are also committed to keeping cash around, like actively committed to keeping cash around and ensuring that it's circulating and people are accepting it. That notwithstanding, some countries like Sweden or Norway have collectively decided that they hate cash, like all of them. And they're basically just saying, well, if you want to pay, then you pay like, you know, with Swish or something like that, yeah. But that's like an additional decision made by the people, the society, and not by the central bank.
But they're very small countries with small populations, which is easy to
Fair enough, yes.
manage.
We do have, sorry, maybe, yeah,
Yeah, so what I really find important in cash, let's say physical money, is a tangibility, the thing to learn it. What about there are still lots of people with severe learning disabilities, like Down syndrome, that's like the IQ of like young children. How do we learn? The thing to learn that stuff is via tangibility. What if we don't have, or if we don't accept, like countries, talks, accept that money anymore, then those people are excluded from society.
You're absolutely right. I think we have to make the difference between. Sorry, the question was.
So the question was if we remove the cash, right? Yes. So we would remove some people or maybe a lot of people from the whole money usage.
But we have to separate the difference here between cryptocurrencies, future currencies, and fiat currencies, and cash. Cash is a sort of a material representation of a fiat currency. So I agree with you. I hate cash. I haven't had cash in my pocket for 6 or 7 years now. I live in London, the same as in Scandinavia, where cash doesn't exist. Most places say you can't take cash. It's card only. I don't even carry a wallet. My phone or my watch does everything, and I even travel abroad without a wallet these days. But there are movements, certainly in the UK, which is sadly no longer in Europe. And Europe, we must keep cash for, as you say, people with disabilities, old people who can't get to grips with smartphones and things like that. It's a reality.
And not even that. I have young kids, and the best thing I can do is give them a €10 note, go to the shop, and they feel what it's worth.
Oh, I don't know.
A big problem with the digital version of money is that people just don't have the feeling anymore how much they can spend,
my
etc.
kids grew up.
Yeah, and just at the end of the day, their pass or their phone or their watch won't work anymore, and it's gone.
My kids grew up with, they're sort of in the late teens, early 20s now, but they grew up with a phone wallet or a card which they could use from 10 years old, and so they know exactly how much they have. We could control what they spend it on, and none of the shops take cash anymore anyway. So they've grown up, and they don't even know how to post a letter. They don't know the concept of how you have to buy an envelope and a stamp. They don't know where you would take it, what you do with it. And they don't know if the grandparent gave them cash, they wouldn't know what to do with it.
And then you show them how you lick the stamp, and they're like, "What are you doing?" I've had that once. Yeah, but we can also try to give them a bit more positive vision on that, because we're software engineers, most of us, and we can shape the future. We can try to design a good user experience that leaves no one behind, or leaves as few people as possible behind. When we ran this pilot project in a rural area in Ghana, we used some physical cards, so these smart cards, and people could just always exchange cash on top of the card. So there was less of a tangibility of the amount of money that you had, but you still had the physical card that had like the logo of the bank and everything on it. And when we did the survey at the end, we actually found that people were putting or topping up much more cash than we thought they would, because they felt it was much safer, because the card was protected by PIN instead of in this cash-heavy area. People would just like store the cash somewhere in their house and it was constantly at risk, right? Because they had to store that. They don't have a bank account, but we could give them this card because the card doesn't necessarily need a bank account in the back end for this digital currency product we're building. And that was quite an interesting learning for us. Being like, okay, it also has advantages, so we lose some advantages of cash, which I fully agree with, but it also has some advantages over cash, and we as engineers can try to make it worth their while, I guess.
Yeah. Crime is something you forget about, but shops don't have cash, vans don't have cash, you don't have to take it to the bank anymore.
Yeah.
People don't walk around with cash, it can't be stolen. It's a big advantage.
There was a question from over there somewhere.
Yes, the lady.
Yeah, I'm not sure who was the first one.
I think
The lady.
Lady was it? Okay.
I mean, when a lot of supermarket or market just like don't accept cash, or maybe they just want a self-service like market, which is to cut down the budget, then how to keep the cash still like exist? Do there need some government regulations or that kind to make sure the cash still works?
So what if you have a shop that doesn't accept cash anymore? How do you deal with that? That's actually what they refer to this afternoon as well. If you are completely cashless as a shop, you will not be obliged to start using cash in the future. Now you can stay in the fully digital part there. That's what they said. But if you do accept multiple payment methods, then you still have to accept cash.
But I think the question was also more about the underlying cash infrastructure, right? So assuming that countries like Sweden, they are shutting down much of their cash infrastructure, how can we then keep cash running? And the answer is yes, the government needs to step in. It's the public sector's responsibility. I think in the Netherlands, there's actually quite a nice solution where the ATMs are all operated from the same company, which is, I hope I'm pronouncing it, Geldmaat or something like that.
Yeah.
Geldmaat. So they are saving a lot of money because the banks don't have to operate individual ATMs. Then maybe you don't have as many ATMs as you used to have, but at least you still have some. And I think this is the way that we have to go towards, because cash usage will decline, and I say that as someone from a company that earns a lot of money from cash handling, printing, management, and so on. And the public sector will have to take care of that it never disappears. But I think we see that from the European Commission that they are really committed to that goal.
Yep, it has to be driven by the governments, and it has to be safe. Something else we haven't addressed is the fact that when you use cards, you use your phone, you use your card, there's a sort of little tax disappearing of the cost of processing that. In the UK now, if you take cash to the bank, if you're taking cash, the banks actually charge you a fee it's like 1% to deal with the cash because they don't want to deal with the cash. But every time you buy something, you buy a coffee downstairs or you go out for a meal, about 2 to 3% of the price that you're paying is being taken off the money with the credit card companies, the issuing banks, the processors, the PayFacs, etc. So one of the new innovations in Europe is open banking, which we should be giving a lot of the money back to the merchants, and that's very important because that 2 to 3%. If you've got you're selling a meal, for example, you go out for a meal for a few people, it's let's say 100 euros. The merchant is getting 97 euros, but if their cost of supplying that meal is 90 euros, for example, they've got to pay the staff, the heating, the advertising, the food, the suppliers, the cleaning, everything else. That 3% comes out of the 10 euros, and that's 30% of their cost. And that's 30% of their profit. So a lot of that money is disappearing to a tax to all of these different banks. So open banking is something which is being pushed by Europe and a number of other countries. So it's something that's going to be very important in the future.
We discussed a lot about usage. Lars, this morning you mentioning that the cryptocurrency, say the European digital money, will not use programmability. When I heard that, I heard will not use now. Because for me, we are, let's say, completely independent and way to think, it will solve a lot of problems by having that programmability. You mentioned the comparison with gold. When we limit the volume of circulation, we don't put, let's say, speed in the money, the flowing of the money, but with programmability, we can buy incentives. What's your, let's say, maybe technical explanation of it? Is it possible? We not do, but is it possible technically or not? And what's your feeling about this? And also about Bitcoin, because there is a blockchain that might help, let's say, some traceability of.
Just to be clear, I'm not a big fan of Bitcoin, other than the thought experiment it was. But no, but the question is all about the programmability of the digital money form in this case. And if I can start, and you
Sure, go ahead.
Take over. You have to take two things apart. Yes, if you create money, and now I'm talking, for example, in an Ethereum situation, if you create a currency by creating a token, this token is in basic pretty limited programmable. So it's programmable that you can print additional one or burn it or pause the transactions, and that's it. The programmability of this money or this currency is not so much in the token in itself, but in the accounts that the token is held in. So if you put this money into a smart contract, this smart contract can be programmed accordingly to a lot of rules you want to build into, but that doesn't have to say anything about the programmability of this money to begin with. So this is something you really have to separate. So the programmability is, at least if you use smart contracts on an Ethereum-based like infrastructure, is quite limited, and quite limited in the fact that you program it, and then most of the times you are not able to update it unless you prepared it for that. But it's pretty limited programmable in this case.
But what maybe one question, what are the major use cases for programmability? So
the programmability of accounts. One of the most interesting one is that, and it's not so much a currency, but it's a token that basically represents the voucher system. And one of the municipalities in the Netherlands, Emmen, actually distributed this token to all the 50,000 households. And this was a token that could only be spent for sustainability improvement of their houses.
okay.
So they could go to a hardware shop and say, all right, I want to buy some isolation, etc. for my house, and they could actually spend it on that, but they couldn't go to the liquor shop and use the same token to do it there. And the upside of doing this used on a token and a blockchain-based system is that the administrational hassle in the background for the municipality diminished really, really big. So this is one of the nice use cases there.
Okay.
I remain a bit unconvinced. We had this conversation before, right? Because essentially,
and we can solve it in both ways. I know.
Yeah, every time you have a use case like that, if it's an actual use case that has a lot of uses and a lot of interest, it's worth considering whether you should build that, and if you build it with something other than Ethereum or blockchain or something else, it'll be much better. So if there really is a need, then go ahead and build it. But if you don't use this stuff, it'll be faster, just as secure. It'll be much more efficient, performant, higher throughput, faster. It'll be better in every single way, particularly if you don't buy the trust story, right? So and that's particularly true if it's one of those permission kinds of things, right? But people use a blockchain within a trusted environment, which there's no point to doing that. So they can just, you trust them anyway. So one of them can just build, and you can, all I'm saying is if there's a valuable use case, then the solution is always better built without that stuff. So I don't think that programmability is an actual use case. The only reason it comes up again and again is because it's associated with that blockchain story and people buy the hype. So we might be kind of disillusioned in this room already. I don't know, some of you, but in the industry that's very different, or very often still very different. People believe, okay, there must be something to this blockchain thing, so I better be using it. So it's kind of a requirement that the word blockchain appears. It's not as if it's any need for any of that stuff, unless, again, if you believe Bitcoin is a good thing, then go ahead and use blockchain for Bitcoin. It makes sense, but for anything else, I'm completely disillusioned with that.
I can offer an opinion that subsumes both of your opinions, which is that, plain and simple speaking, the ECB does not care about programmability for the sole reason that they, for example, they don't want to get into programming vouchers for some kind of Dutch municipality because they simply don't care about that. They're there to issue currency and to ensure that everything is up and running. So what they're not saying is that it should never be possible. So maybe there's too many knots. So I think they are open to the idea that intermediaries, like banks, build bridges between the digital euro on the one side and programmable ecosystems on the other side. For example, standing orders, recurring payments, that's programmability, right? So it would be pretty bad if you couldn't have a bank account where you can't have every month a particular payment. That's a programmable payment, right? But even more interesting use case, I don't know, you might want to model some kind of financial contracts. You might want to have futures or options or whatever. You can do all of that things, I think, if you just find a commercial bank that will be willing to, I don't know, do an integration with whatever blockchain you have or with whatever other non-blockchain ecosystem you have. And I mean, I'm not working for the ECB, but I think they would be open to that, of course, under some kind of regulatory regime, so that you can't just do whatever. But I mean, EU is also coming out with some crypto regulations, so that's, I think that they have that on the radar. It's just that the ECB themselves, I don't see them working on that at all. It's just that they are maybe using also some open banking techniques, some mandatory APIs and so on. So that's probably the story behind that.
Basically, I create a dynamic when I stimulate the economy. And basically, government or the Eurozone or whatever can put that into a balance like, okay, let's save the economy, guys.
So you're asking something basically about negative interest. So yeah, I kind of incentivizing.
So repeating the question, sorry, I didn't want
go ahead.
Yeah, so it was the idea of maybe a smart contract or something that said if you keep your money in the bank, you're not stimulating the economy, so you get fined. But I mean, that's, as you were just saying, Lars, is exactly what negative interest is, and the banks have been doing this for decades or even centuries. And to go back to the other thing about whether your smart contracts and where you spend your money, if a place takes a credit card, they have what's called a bin, and those bins are associated with the type of business. And so, if you've got a liquor store or an off-license, as we call it, and a hardware store, they have different types of business, and they charge different ways. And so, as my kids, when they were 10 years old, 15 years ago or so, or less, had these cards, it would not accept this card for the £10 pocket money that they got in a liquor store, for want of a better word, but they would be able to spend it in somewhere else. So it's again, I think, going back to Stefan, exactly what you said. Every time you say something, I agree 100%. This is great.
What do you want to drink?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's to me, it's all solutions looking for problems to solve, which largely because people are not willing to read history books and understand what's actually there, have already been solved many times over.
Yeah, so.
But there the funny thing is that, the funny thing there is that for some reason using this new technology, in some cases it's pretty easy to set it up, pretty easy to use for a lot of people, and a lot of people for some reason don't know it already exists.
Well, that's the problem.
And there is the problem that they say, all right, we have a solution. People say, hey, that's cool, and for some reason the old world couldn't sell this solution. Yeah. And I agree, a lot of the solutions that are being designed based on blockchain, to my point of view, are not new solutions, but maybe a bit more efficient, maybe not. Sometimes they're not. But the fact that it's now being adopted in a lot of cases where there might be a centralized solution, because for any decentralized solution, we can come up with a centralized solution as well. For some reason, they do want to adopt the decentralized part a bit more than the centralized part. It's also a gut feeling where we couldn't get our heads around why will it work in that way and what. And maybe you should see it as you can have a parallel track right now. You can have a choice in this case. You either want to do it through a centralized solution or through a decentralized solution. And this is something, and that's the analogy that I always take with regards to, for example, the travel industry. I could always fly from A to B using a standard airline, But all of a sudden, these low-cost carriers came along saying, hey, you can use us as well. And with the old-fashioned airlines, you had a lot of guarantees, a lot of service, and the new ones came along. They said, we were cheap, but you have no service whatsoever. And it serves a certain purpose in this case. And this is where we could differentiate with these kind of, for example, financial-related products. If I deploy a smart contract, which acts as an escrow account where I put the value in and I just pay a few cents transaction cost, literally, depending on the infrastructure that you use. You could say, okay, but you don't have the guarantee of the bank if something goes wrong, etc. But hey, if I pay for the guarantee using a bank, I don't pay cents to the dollar, I pay hundreds of dollars depending on the amount. And now you can have a choice of doing it in some way. And if something goes wrong in the smart contract place, hey, you have no guarantees whatsoever. That's a risk that you took.
I mean, are your smart contracts written in a Turing-complete language?
Sorry?
Are your smart contracts written in a Turing-complete language?
They're written in Solidity in this case. So.
I mean, I asked the question because you can't prove that they won't fail or get stuck. There's all these little tiny things which, you know,
but
if
again,
you've been programming for a long time, you learn.
Again, they never failed. They might fail in the future, but then again, I pay cents instead of hundreds of euros. And that's the difference. That's the risk that you are willing to take or not.
I don't think there's a. I mean,
maybe one. I just want to say we are over time. Maybe
already.
Just, you know,
wow.
maybe one minute left. 1 minute left.
They're still here.
So now it's time for the fist fight.
Now it's time for the fist fight.
Where's the drinks?
No, I think. We are 5 minutes over time, and I think if everyone's okay, we had a couple of questions regarding hacking, privacy, anonymity. Maybe we want to spend 2 minutes on that, if that's possible.
Which of those?
No, but let's maybe just a few words on privacy issues when using digital cash. Maybe 2 minutes, if there are any opinions.
Well, you're utterly anonymous, so there's no privacy. Everything's anonymous, so no one's going to know who you are. So when
in cash, you mean?
Where?
No, well, cash is the same as a sort of a cryptocurrency. If you sit on a totally anonymous network, then nobody.
Yeah.
There's nothing to be stolen.
If you sit on a totally anonymous network, and there are
So that's
hardly
an
any
advantage,
large-scale totally anonymous.
If you're buying
networks.
drugs, porn, etc., which.
But still, you can follow account numbers.
Yeah. No, you absolutely. There are ways of doing it.
And maybe from the perspective of the central bank issued digital euro, also the European Commission has made it very clear that they're expecting this to be fully private to a certain extent, and that extent would probably be transaction limits. So if I'm making a payment that is, for example, offline or the merchant, and I'm paying 50 euros, then there would not be any metadata or any personally identifying information being transmitted to third parties. But if you're exceeding some amounts, it's like wanting to buy a house with 10 million in cash. They will not let you do that. But if you can buy a house for 500 euro in cash, if there's such a house, a tiny house maybe, then you can do that.
I think
model of a tiny.
Although I'm not typically super skeptical about the government, I think the government will have a super hard time resisting the temptation to break that rule. Although I totally agree they should keep it anonymous, the temptation to make it non-anonymous through some kind of, legal exception for the state itself is going to be there. So if you really care about anonymity, is that the word? Then I think the paper version is still the better one.
It's bad enough with
and we tend to trust our governments here in Western Europe quite high compared to other regions in the world, but you should always design a system and also the regulation around it with one thing in mind: what if they go rogue after all? So can they misuse it in the end?
Thank you very much. It went actually in a different direction than I thought, but I think we had just a lot of questions, and I mean the audience drives the conversation, I think. If we would be online, we had it in a previous GOTO, I must say, we just opened another Zoom session, and we said, whoever wants to join the panel, we just continue for an hour, and that's what we did. But now, here it's not possible. Thank you very much for asking all the questions, for making it so interactive, and thank you to you guys that you participated and answered all the questions.
We'll be in the bar afterwards.
And we will be on the bar afterwards. Exactly.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you.